All right, this is still part of course 1. This is, it is still chapter 1, lesson 1, but we are going to be in part D right now. And we're going to be talking about multiplying decimals or decimals by decimals. And it's a tricky concept to work with. Okay, so what we're going to be doing in this video, and it's not going to be a long video, probably one of your shorter videos, is using decimal models to multiply decimals. So tomorrow, anticipate when you get to school that you won't be working so much on book work. We're going to have some activities on the smartboard. And then we're also going to be talking about traditional multiplication and practicing with that a little bit more. Just noticing today that some of you are still really comfortable with lattice or not really sure how to set up your multiplication, your standard multiplication, or even partial products when you were doing it that way. So I really want to make sure that I spend some time talking with you individually on that before we really move on into multiplying decimals by decimals. So tomorrow when you're here, we're going to be practicing using base 10 blocks to model multiplication of decimals. So when we are taking something like 7/10 and multiplying it by 6/10, we can use a base 10 flat or 100 to help us look at that because we're using a 10 by 10 because we have tenths times tenths. Now, though we're multiplying tenths by tenths, and it's not the best picture on this video, we still remember that there's 100 cubes within this flat. Okay, so we have, I just want you to remember that each cube, there's 100 cubes on the flat. So one square is going to represent, so if we shade in just one square, it's going to represent 1/100th. So when we're taking something like 7/10 times 6/10, what we're doing on a flat is we're shading in the area between 7/10, so we'll count up 7/10, and then we're going to take 6/10 and we're going to close that rectangle in, or that array in, and in a sense count up how many hundredths are in that rectangle. So if we counted them up, we would notice that we have 42 hundredths. A lot of you are probably saying, well, I know that 7 times 6 is 42, but it's still that decimal that we're confused with when we multiply. When we have 7/10 times 6/10, some people can say, well, that's 42, and I know that I have one decimal place here and another here, so I have two decimal places, and I'll put a 0 in to hold that whole number place value. So I have 42 hundredths. Some of you might be able to recognize it, but after watching today, I know that a lot of you are going to be struggling with picturing or kind of understanding where that comes from. It's always good to know why it works the way that it does. I'm just going to exit out of there and hopefully get able to scroll down so we can look at some more examples. Yeah, let's scroll down here. Here we go. So here would be some practice that we'll work on right now. So we're going to use decimal models to show each product. So if we have that flat and we have, those individual 100 pieces, each one being 100th, and we're going to take 3/10 by 3/10. Remember, there are probably not the best picture here, but when we're looking at that, we're going to count up 1, 2, 3/10, and then we're going to count another 3/10, and then we're going to close off that rectangle. You can even shade it in to know that that's what you're talking about. And then what you're going to count is how many hundredths are in that piece of 3/10 by 3/10. Okay, so if you counted them up, you should see that there are, not 9/10, 900ths within that 3/10 by 3/10 model. You could also say, those of you that are really picking up on it, kind of that abstract way of thinking, you know that 3 times 3 is 9. You also know that you need to recognize the place value, so you have one decimal place here, one decimal place here, So you're going to have 2 decimal places. And you're going to put a 0 in for that ones place. And you have 9 hundredths. Okay. Moving on to the next one, looking at our flat. Now here we go. We're going to go up 4. We're going to go across 9. Shade in that area. And then when we have flats tomorrow, we're going to, you can count them or kind of get an idea of how many are in there. And we should see that we have 36 hundredths. You could also say, that 4 times 9 is 36. And then you're going to move over 2 place values because there's 2 decimal place values here, and put your 0 in. Okay. Same with over here. We have our flat because we have a tenth times a tenth. Go up 9 over 5. Count how many are in the shaded area, and you'll have 45 hundredths. Or you're recognizing that 9 times 5 is 45. 2 decimal places. Move over, put your decimal in, and a 0. Okay, so working with taking a tenth by a tenth tomorrow and just kind of piecing it together and getting comfortable with that before we move on. All right, let me get to the next page here. Because not only are we going to take a tenth and multiply it by a tenth. Let's see if this page is even going to turn for me. It looks like it's loading. Here we go. All right, we're also going to practice taking a tenth and multiplying it by a hundredth. So think of in your head, if you are taking, thinking of a 10 by 100, we need to have 1,000 units, and they did that drawing for you. We have 100 units this way, and we have 10 units this way. In there, we have 1,000 square units. So when we're getting that model, that's what we want. We want to be talking about 1,000th. Okay. So if we were going to take something like 8 tenths times 16 hundredths, we would count up 8, and we go across 16, and then we're going to shade that in, and then we're going to end up counting how many cubes fall within that. And when we count, we're going to see that we have 128 thousandths. We're also able to do that multiplication and say we have 16 hundredths times 8. And remember, when we were talking today, some of you were getting really hung up on that decimal. Don't worry about that decimal until you are done multiplying. Okay, so we're going to start 8 times 6. We have 48. 8 tenths times 1 tenth plus 4. 12. 8, 0, 0, 1. Okay. And then we don't need to multiply the 0 because we know that what we're going to end up with is just a bunch of zeros down here, and that doesn't make sense. So the more you get familiar with multiplying and with zeros, you notice that when you have a 0, you don't need to go across in the situation and put zeros across the way. So now what we're going to do, because we have finished multiplying, is we're going to count how many decimal places we have. We have 1, 2, 3. So we need to have 3 decimal places in our product. So we're going to put 1, 2, 3. So we have the picture model that we're going to really practice, and I know that some of you are going to be comfortable with that tomorrow, and some of you might even be here tomorrow and able to multiply and really kind of understand that way. I'm going to move the page down here. Let's do a couple practice before I go on. All right, so we have a tenth times a hundredth. We know that our product is going to be in the thousandths because of our model up top. So we'll practice with the model. So we would go up 3 and over 14 and close in that those thousandths and then add them up to see how many you have. Or we could take 14 hundredths times 3 tenths. Remember, we are not worried about that decimal place until we end up with our product. Taking 4 times 3, 12, 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, and 3 times 0 is 0. Looking at the number of decimal places we have, 1, 2, 3, we need to have 3 in our product. We'll put a 0 to hold that place value to the ones place. So we have 42 thousandths as a product, okay? So 42 thousandths. All right, we're going to stop right there. And that's what we're going to work on tomorrow. So come ready to use the smartboard, use the base 10 blocks, come with questions, and really practice on multiplying a decimal times a decimal. I will still add 3 questions to this for you to attempt. But remember, it's not for a grade, it's just so I can see where you're at. So do your best and submit it to me, and then we will discuss it tomorrow. Have a good night, and thank you for watching the video.